Why are you here, Dad? I asked, surprised. He was lying in an old tent outside in the hot sun, just like the ones I remember from my childhood. Don't worry about it, he replied weakly, leaving me speechless. Since he hurt his leg, he'd been living with my brother and his wife. Whenever I called, my brother would say Dad was fine, and his wife would laugh and say she was taking good care of him. They told me I couldn't reach Dad because he wasn't good with technology and had made new friends at the hospital, leading a happy life. But seeing Dad lying there, looking so tired and weak, I realized they had lied. Dad slowly raised his hand to me and pointed in a direction. There I was, living alone in the countryside, away from the city where my parents lived. I moved there to follow my dream of working at a resort hotel. 2 years ago, my parents were in a car accident, my mom passed away, and Dad was hurt, both physically and emotionally. He was deeply sad after losing her. They were always together and known as a loving couple in our neighborhood. Dad wasn't the type to go out much, but he traveled often for my mom, who loved to travel. On one of those trips, they had the accident, and only Dad survived. Why did I survive and not her? Dad would ask himself every day, feeling guilty. The injury made him stay at home even more, and since I was busy with work, I couldn't be there to take care of him much. Thankfully, I have a brother, Jack, who's 7 years older than me. Jack and his wife, Sarah, lived nearby and checked in on Dad when they could. Hasn't Dad gotten a lot weaker? I asked one day. They replied, they were always so close. It's understandable, so don't worry about it. Focus on your work, Jack said. You're welcome. When I thanked him. Lately, I had been affected by the recession, and my income had dropped. I needed to start saving. How about you, Clara? Jack asked. I'm doing well, thanks to tourists coming back. It's been busy. Unlike you, the overtime pay has helped, so I'm not struggling financially. In fact, I got a raise and think I earn more than most of my peers. The downside is, I don't have much private time. It was the first time Jack mentioned his financial struggles. He told me that they had to cut back on food and were just getting by. He hadn't bought clothes in over a year, and they hadn't been on any trips either. They wanted children, but with everything going on, that wasn't an option. I was worried about them. Then, Jack said, Dad's leg is getting worse, and he needs help. Sarah and I are thinking about moving in with him so we can take care of him and save money at the same time. I appreciate it. Let me know if I can help in any way, I said. Thanks, Clara. Good luck with your work, Sarah replied, looking happy. So, to save money and take care of Dad, Jack and Sarah decided to live with him. Dad and Jack had never gotten along that well. When Jack was younger, he'd often come home and get scolded by Dad. As they got older, they stopped talking much. After Jack finished college, he hardly came home. I hadn't seen much of a relationship between them since, so it surprised me when Jack said he wanted to move in with Dad. It was clear they were struggling financially, and the idea of saving on rent made sense, but I still worried if they would truly take good care of him. Since I couldn't visit often because of work, I called Jack regularly. Hey, Jack, how's Dad doing? He's smiling a bit more these days. Isn't it tough taking care of him? I feel bad I'm not there. It's been 3 months now, and we've gotten used to living together. At first, I was worried, but it seems Sarah and I are really committed to supporting Dad, so I can focus on my work without stressing. Years passed, and after summer vacation, I decided to visit my hometown for the first time in a while. I called Jack to let him know I was coming, so I wouldn't surprise them. Hey, Jack, it's been a while. Oh, it really has. How are you? Do you think you'll be able to come home this year? I was relieved to hear his friendly voice. Yeah, things have calmed down at work, so I'm thinking of coming home for a couple of days. That's great to hear. Be careful coming back. Thanks, let Dad and Sarah know too. I tried to call Dad but couldn't get through, so I let Jack know and then went home for the first time in years. This was the longest I'd stayed away since Mom passed away. I had been worried about Dad, but I felt better knowing Jack and Sarah were living with him. I hadn't been able to visit for a long time because I was so busy. The house in the city felt much hotter than where I lived. I finally arrived, sweating and wondering how long the heat would last. Then I saw an old tent in the front yard, which I didn't recognize. Curious, I walked over and felt a presence inside. I hurried into the house. I'm back, I said, feeling a bit relieved. Welcome back, Clara. You look pale. What's wrong? Sarah asked, looking concerned. I think there's someone in the tent, I said quickly. That's Dad, Sarah replied calmly. What, Dad's in the tent in this heat? I rushed to check inside the tent, and there was Dad, lying down as if he had collapsed. Sarah, I'm calling an ambulance. Dad's exhausted, I said urgently. No need for an ambulance, Sarah shouted at me. Dad wants to live in the garden. It's not a problem, she said, her tone making no sense. Dad, exhausted in this heat, saying he wants to be in the garden? That didn't sound right. Dad had always been a homebody. He never went camping or to the beach, not even when Mom was healthy. He always said the best place to be in summer was in a cool room and in a warm room in winter. There was no way he would want to be outside in this heat. Something felt wrong, and I had a bad feeling. I rushed over to the tent and called out to Dad. Dad, what happened? Are you okay? It's nothing, Clara, I'm fine, Dad said weakly. Do you live out here in this heat every day? Don't you want to come inside? Dad slowly pointed to the main house. That's where my room used to be, but since living with Jack and Sarah, they've made me stay in the closet. Dad revealed something shocking. In the closet? I thought they were taking care of you. They've never taken care of me. They just live together to save money. I've told them I can't stay in the closet because of my leg. They told me if I complain, I should live outside, and that's how I ended up here in the yard, in this old tent, in this heat. Dad continued, and the truth hit me hard. It was clear Jack and Dad never got along. I blamed myself for trusting Jack. Sarah wasn't the type to take care of someone, either. I remembered how Jack used to complain about Sarah going out drinking and coming home late. This couple, who never cooked for themselves and ate out every day, clearly weren't fit to take care of Dad, but I had foolishly hoped they would do better. This isn't right. I'm here now, I thought. It was shocking to find out how terribly they had been treating Dad. Even though they had told me on the phone they were taking good care of him, they had forced him to live in a closet and then thrown him out into the yard. It was unforgivable. Anger built up inside me, and ignoring Sarah's plea, I called an ambulance. I told you, don't call an ambulance, Sarah shouted, desperately trying to stop me. But I ignored her and kept going. When the ambulance arrived, they took Dad, and I went with them. Dad was close to heat stroke, but thankfully, it wasn't life-threatening. However, he was hospitalized because he hadn't been getting proper meals and was living in an unsanitary environment. Dad, rest easy and take your time to recover, I said. He replied, Clara, you're my lifesaver. I was ready to join your mom every day. He looked relieved. What are you talking about? We need you to live much longer, I said, realizing Dad had been living like each day was his last. Tears welled up, but I smiled for his sake. I went back to the family house to get things for Dad's hospital stay. Jack, Sarah, we need to talk about what's been going on with Dad. I confronted my brother and his wife, furious about how Dad had been treated. We were just being distant, hoping Dad would leave on his own, Sarah admitted casually. Yeah, surprisingly, he was stubborn and wouldn't leave, Jack added, like it was no big deal. It was clear they knew how badly they had treated Dad. They laughed as they talked about trying to make him leave. Do you even hear yourselves? It's a miracle he's alive, but if something had happened to him, you two would be criminals, I shouted. You're overreacting. We fed him and checked on him once a day, Jack said, as if he was talking about an animal. He's in the hospital because he wasn't fed properly. How can you think it's okay to kick him out of his own house? I argued. Jack and Sarah had no remorse and started making excuses. We didn't want to live here by choice. We moved in because we were struggling financially, but caregiving turned out to be harder than we thought, they said. Then Sarah added, that's why we tried to put him in a facility, but Dad really hates the idea of leaving the house that holds memories of his wife. He even tried to kick us out. They tried to make it sound like they were the victims, struggling with caregiving. They had tried to force Dad to leave, but instead, it was them who almost got kicked out. Having free rent is a big deal when you're poor, so we couldn't just let him kick us out, Jack explained. I couldn't believe my brother would stoop so low just to take over the house, Jack admitted. Even though Dad and I weren't close, I thought as an adult, I could manage living with him. It was shocking how cruel their plan was. Jack confessed that they had locked Dad in the closet or thrown him outside to make him choose to live with me. Living in the countryside is better for his health anyway, so we were planning to send him to you, Jack said. He's so stubborn. We thought he'd leave before you arrived, but he held on. Sarah laughed like it was a funny story. Now that you're back, Dad will probably say he wants to live with you, Jack laughed. Then he said something outrageous. Now that Dad's in the hospital, this house is ours, so pack your stuff and leave. I couldn't believe my ears. How could he say that in someone else's house? I gathered Dad's things and went back to the hospital. Dad, I heard from Jack about what happened. It must have been tough, I said, trying to get them out of the house. That house is full of memories of Mom. I can't just let people like that take it. Dad's love for Mom kept him going, and it was comforting to hear. Don't worry about the house. We'll figure it out. I might be in the hospital for a while, but would you like to live with me after I'm discharged? I asked. Dad seemed happy at the idea. Once I got Dad's approval to live together, I went back to my place. 2 months later, I got a bunch of calls from Jack. There are strange men in the house. What's going on? Jack was furious, demanding answers, but I passed the phone to someone else without saying anything. The person who took the phone was our grandfather. Hey, Jack, I've heard the story from Clara. "You've done something terrible to my son-in-law," Grandpa said. "Grandpa?" Jack sounded surprised. "Our family home was built by Grandpa as a wedding gift for Mom when she was young. Dad was adopted into the family, and Grandpa always treated him like his own son. When I told Grandpa everything, he was furious and sent his strongest apprentices to kick Jack and Sarah out. After the commotion, I immediately called Grandpa, who owned the land and the house. Grandpa had always been strict, and Jack was afraid of him. I knew Grandpa would be able to do something." "Jack, all your things have been sent to Sarah's parents' house," Grandpa said. "Don't just make decisions on your own." Jack tried to resist, but with fear in his voice. "A person who treated their family like that has no right to argue. Got any complaints?" Grandpa said firmly. "No, sir, I'm sorry," Jack mumbled, defeated. After that, Grandpa was always kind to me, but tough on Jack as a kid. If Jack cried, Grandpa would tell him to stop and toughen up. Grandpa would spank him, and Jack would cry even more, which only made Grandpa scold him more. What was acceptable back then is now considered inappropriate. Watching Jack, I was glad to be born a girl. Although Jack had been rebellious toward Dad, he never dared to defy Grandpa. This time, too, he tried to resist, but Grandpa quickly took charge, showing Jack that he couldn't win. Jack and Sarah's things were sent to Sarah's parents' house as Grandpa had arranged. When they arrived at Sarah's parents' house, apparently, it had been a long time since they had been back. "Hey, Dad, I think our stuff has arrived, so we came to pick it up," Sarah said, as her father came out from the back room. "I've heard everything from Clara's side. You're going to live with us from now on," he said. Then my brother responded, "It's okay, we'll stay at my family home." Sarah's dad stepped in. "Don't even think about coming back after what you've done to your father. I'll fix your attitude." Sarah's dad was furious. I'd heard he was very strict, and after I explained everything to him, they had no choice but to live under his strict rules. Sarah was taught to cook from scratch and had to prepare meals for the family every day. Jack was allowed to take on a side job and helped Sarah's dad with his work on weekends. After Dad was discharged, Grandpa told him the house needed repairs because of the damage. Dad was determined to fix the house filled with memories of Mom. He worked hard at rehab and made an impressive recovery. "You did great with rehab. The doctors were amazed by how quickly you recovered," I said. Dad replied, "Of course, it's the house full of memories of your mom. I need to do my best to fix it." He spoke with a bright tone like the old days. It seemed that his love for Mom had helped him recover. With Grandpa's guidance and the help of his apprentices, we slowly repaired the house. While working on the house, Dad seemed to regain the energy he had when Mom was still with us. "You really seem to enjoy working on the house. It brings back so many memories. It feels like I'm talking to your mom," Dad said. I felt like she might have been far away, but maybe she was always there, watching over us. Hearing Dad say that almost brought tears to my eyes. Despite all the terrible things my brother and his wife had done, I wondered if maybe Mom had been protecting us. Eventually, the house repairs were finished. When everything was done, Dad made the decision to let go of the house. "Dad, are you sure?" I asked. "I feel like Mom would say it's okay not to hold on to this house anymore. Now that it's so beautiful, I really want someone to live in it," he said calmly. "I understand. I think she'd be happy too," I said. Thanks to the renovations Dad and the team made, a buyer was found quickly. With all of this, Dad and Grandpa decided to move into nursing homes. "I've been visiting more often. Dad, how are you?" I asked. "I'm having a great time. I've made a lot of friends. It's all thanks to you, Clara." "Really, thank you," Dad said, smiling. Dad seemed to enjoy his time with the other residents, and it made my visits with him even more precious. My life has become more peaceful as well. As for Jack and Sarah, they had gotten used to the discipline at Sarah's parents' house and were happy to be freed from caregiving. "Yeah, the rules aren't strict all the time, and the house is big. It's nice," Sarah said. "Being free from caregiving is actually pretty lucky for us," Jack admitted. Sarah smiled. "Thanks to this, we're doing well despite the low income." I felt grateful. My brother and his wife had adapted to life at Sarah's parents' house and seemed happy to be free from caregiving, showing no sign of remorse. Then, Sarah's dad, furious at their lack of repentance, kicked them out. "There's no sign of remorse, so you might as well leave," Sarah's dad said quietly but firmly. "Dad, wait, pack your things and leave immediately," he ordered, expelling them.